Under the dim, flickering light of the old security booth, Daniel sat hunched over his logbook, the sound of the ancient clock ticking, louder than it should have, in the suffocating silence of midnight. The building, an abandoned commercial complex in downtown Chicago, had been empty for nearly a decade, but tonight, like every other night, he was paid to watch over it, to make sure no one trespassed, no vagrant sneaked inside. The air was damp, laced with the faint scent of mold and old stone, and every time the wind pushed through the broken vents, it whispered in low, almost human tones. Daniel hated this place, hated how the shadows moved when they shouldn't, hated the way the floors creaked above him, though he knew no one was there. It wasn't just an old building. It was a breathing thing full of memory and dust, something that seemed to remember being alive. The first few nights had been normal, routine checks, coffee, and silence. But that was before he noticed the statue. It stood in the corner of the ground floor hallway, covered in grime and half lit by a ceiling bulb that never stopped. Flickering, he'd never seen anyone bring it in. Yet there it was, an ancient-looking figure, carved from dark stone with hollow eyes that seemed too deep for their sockets, its mouth twisted in what looked like a silent scream. There was no plaque, no tag, no record of it in the inventory sheets, left behind by the building's old owners. Daniel would pass it on his rounds, flashlight grazing across its surface, and for a split second, he'd swear its head had turned a few inches toward him. Once he even thought he heard a low humming near it, like someone exhaling through stone lungs. He told himself it was his imagination, the trick of exhaustion, caffeine, and isolation. But deep down he knew something wasn't right. The next night, as he sat sipping his coffee, the intercom crackled for no reason. Static hissed, then faded. Then came the sound, a knock, soft and deliberate, echoing through the empty hallway. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send cold through his veins. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the corridor. The light stuttered as it hit the damp walls. "Hello," he called out. No answer. He checked the main door. It was locked. The windows were shut tight. Still, that knocking came again, closer this time, as if right behind the wall. He backed away slowly, listening, heart pounding. But when he spun around, it was no one. The statue, however, was no longer in the corner. It stood now in the middle of the hall, facing him directly, its expression warped as if caught mid-scream. The air seemed to hum around it, and for a moment he thought he heard a voice, faint like stone grinding against bone. Whisper his name. He stumbled backward, dropped the flashlight, and the beam rolled across the floor, illuminating streaks of what looked like wet footprints, leading away from the statue, deeper into the building's dark belly. Daniel's breath hitched. He thought about leaving, calling the supervisor, quitting right there. But he needed the job, he needed the money. So he told himself again, it's just your mind. Just fatigue. But the following nights were worse. The silent knocks became more frequent, coming from random directions. Sometimes from the ceiling, sometimes from the far end of the empty lobby, sometimes from the very door behind him. He'd run to check, but nothing was ever there. Once the knocks grew so faint and steady that they began to sound like breathing. Slow, calm, patient breathing on the other side of the wall. The elevator, which had been out of order for years, began moving on its own at 3:03 a.m. every night. Daniel would hear its old cables groan, and the doors open somewhere above. He tried to ignore it, but curiosity eventually got the better of him. One night he decided to check. He rode the elevator to the top floor, and the doors opened to a corridor he had never seen before. Noah cleaner lined with mirrors on both sides. Yet he knew the building had only 4 floors. The hallway stretched on forever, each reflection of him looking slightly off, as if lagging by a second or smiling when he wasn't. At the far end stood the statue again, its reflection missing from every mirror. Its eyes were now open wider, and its stone mouth looked like it was whispering something Daniel he heard. Though no lips moved, he turned and ran back into the elevator. But before the doors could close, something cold brushed his neck, a touch gentle and deliberate, like fingers made of ice he didn't turn to see. That night he refused to sleep in the booth. He sat outside the building in the parking lot until dawn, chain-smoking and shaking. When he returned inside in the morning, the statue was back in its original place. Dust settled at its base like it had never moved. Still, Daniel began to notice new details. Fine cracks along its arms that looked like veins. Faint stains near its hands that resembled dried blood. The logbook started showing extra entries. Handwritten lines in red ink he didn't remember writing. Do not let it see you. The door will knock again. Someone is inside. He tried to laugh it off until one night. The power went out, total darkness. His flashlight wouldn't turn on. His phone died even though it was fully charged. He could hear the building breathe again, its pipes groaning, walls shifting. The faint echo of a woman crying somewhere distant. Then the knock came again. Only this time it was on the glass right behind him. He froze, his breath visible in the cold air. Slowly he turned, and in the faint light of the moon, he saw a handprint appear on the window from the inside. He stumbled back, tripping over his chair, heart hammering as the knocking turned into pounding. Who's there? He shouted, his voice cracking, but the pounding stopped instantly. Silence then from somewhere deep in the halls. He heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps. He followed them, shaking, the sound of his own pulse filling his ears. The steps led him toward the basement, toward the locked maintenance area. No one was supposed to enter, but the door was open, swinging slightly. Inside, the air was colder, heavier, the floor was damp. The walls lined with peeling paint and old photographs of the building's construction days. One photo caught his attention. A group of workers standing next to what looked exactly like the same statue. But this photo was from 1931. The caption below read, "Memorial for the Lost Worker." Daniel frowned, tracing the words, when suddenly the photo shifted. No, it moved. The eyes of the statue in the photo turned toward him. And before he could react, something behind him whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." He spun around, beam flashing, but only saw the flicker of a shadow, retreating into the darkness. He chased it, his boots splashing through shallow water. But every turn led him deeper, until he found himself in a dead-end corridor, and there it was, the statue blocking his way. Its hands were raised now, cracked fingers stretched toward him. Its face split open in a silent scream. He screamed too, stumbled backward and hit something soft. A person. He turned and saw himself. Or rather, something wearing his uniform, his face pale, eyes hollow. The other Daniel smiled faintly and whispered, "You've been here longer than you think." Then everything went black. When he woke, he was sitting in the security booth again. Morning light streamed through the glass. His watch said 8:00 a.m. He thought maybe it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by stress. But then he saw the new statue standing beside the booth. Smaller shaped, almost like him, with his same security badge carved into the stone. The logbook lay open, the red ink message now clear. The building keeps what it needs. Daniel ran. He didn't stop until he was outside. Gasping in the sunlight, he quit that day. Never went back, but a week later, while scrolling through news feeds, he saw an article, "Night guard missing from historic building. Replacement hired." The attached photo showed the new guard, smiling in front of the lobby, and just behind him, barely visible in the shadows, stood the same statue, its face now turned slightly toward the camera. The story spread online, people calling it cursed, others calling it fake. But those who worked there said at night, they still heard the knocks, faint but persistent, coming from the glass door of the security booth. Sometimes when the power flickered, they swore they saw a figure standing in the hall, a shadow that watched them, followed them, breathed just behind their necks. One janitor even claimed he heard a whisper while sweeping near the old elevator. Daniel. He quit the next day, leaving his mop and keys behind. The building was eventually shut down again, sealed off for renovations, but nearby residents still talk about it, how lights still glow in the top floor at 3:03 a.m. how the elevator sometimes moves, even though there's no power, and how a faint knock echoes through the street. When the wind passes by, some say it's the statue calling for another watcher. Others believe it's the shadow of Daniel himself, trapped inside, doomed to guard the place forever. No one knows for sure, but on cold, quiet nights when the city sleeps, and the moonlight hits the old building just right. If you listen closely, you might still hear it. The sound of stone shifting, the whisper of your name from somewhere deep within the walls, and the slow, patient rhythm of a silent knock, waiting for you to answer. Hello, dear viewers. How was this story? What do you think about it? And subscribe our channel kindly